Hey y'all, happy Baby Friday. Hope everybody's having a good week. I would like to welcome today my guest, Rozmin Bapat. She is the founder and CEO of CodeRite Healthcare Consulting. So we are going to talk about denials management, some different kind of things and helpful ideas for y'all and get y'all's feedback on what they are. So Rozmin, thank you very much for being able to join me today.
Hi, Betty. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
And thank you. And as people come in, y'all just kind of throw your highs in there so we know that you're here. And as usual, I'm going to talk to Rozmin a little bit first so that y'all can get to know her a little bit better if you're not familiar with her. And then as we start to talk about our topic, and beforehand, y'all just start throwing your questions up in there. We'll get to them as we can as we go through our talk today. I see Haley is on. So, hey, Haley, she's a regular. And Ladriba, one of my mentees. Hey, Ladriba. Oh, and Ladriba is from out your way. She's in Texas, Rozmin. So, thanks, everybody. Barb, good, good. All right. Well, as I said, Rozmin is the founder and CEO of CodeRite Healthcare Consulting. So, she has been in the field for more than 15 years. And she's been working with all departments of medical practices. So she goes from soup to nuts, so front desk to practice administration. She has a unique perspective, and that positions her to be an ally for independent physicians, which is what we definitely need for our independent docs. She enjoys all aspects of medical billing, coding, and compliance, and she is constantly educating herself to be a subject matter expert or a SME for her clients. So that is a very good thing. I know one of the things with being a consultant is, sitting in the evening or, after working hours, it's like you always have a journal or, you're Googling something or reading something, to kind of try to keep up on everything. So I find that we do lots and lots of reading. So, and then
Yes.
Rozmin enjoys her time with her husband and daughter, and she volunteers in her community. So that's always really nice. Good to see that. So, but yes, keeping up on everything can be kind of tough. Um, uh, in what we're doing because there's just so much and so many aspects to look at things, which is why I like doing this, because I can get different people like you for RCM stuff, and then people from surgical sides and people from administration, and so we can talk about the vastness of what we do in our field, in the healthcare field. So that's really cool. So yes, I'm feeling you on the lots of reading.
Yes. I still feel like no matter how much I read, there's so much to learn from other people as well, you like yourself and like so many others that I look up to, podcasts and articles and journals and things. So I sometimes I do get Cliff Note versions from other people because I'm like, oh, do I really want to read a 10-page article? It's like, no, maybe I'll just listen to a podcast for that. So yeah,
Yes,
we're
yes.
constantly educating ourselves, which is so true in this field.
Well, and that's, that's part of what comes along with the territory. And I think if you enjoy what we're doing, you enjoy what you do, then it's not, it's not like a drudgery. It's just something you do. I mean, I don't think twice on the weekend of, like reading things on something that's coming up or some new compliance thing or whatever. It's not like I'm like, oh God, I got to read. I'm like, actually, I was like, oh yeah. And I don't even think twice about doing it. You just all of a sudden find yourself doing things like that,
Yeah.
So now Rozmin has, I'll put up and I will put in the chat her, why isn't that starting? I'll put in the chat her profile so that y'all can go and follow her and connect with her on LinkedIn and her YouTube channel and things like that, as I normally do when we're discussing things and I have guests, so that y'all know where to find her and get a hold of her for stuff. Because I know she also has a YouTube channel, right, Rosemary?
I do. I haven't posted anything on it for a long time. And my daughter always tells me, she's like, you don't have a lot of audience, mommy. So it's like, yeah, it's just a very niche kind of a thing, but I should get back into it. Yeah, I haven't done anything in a while, but there's some videos on there. Yeah.
Good. So y'all can go check those out. Let me So with our little getting to know you kind of stuff, Rozmin, I said when I was looking at your profile that you've been in the field for a little over 15 years. Where did you start? How did you start? Kind of like give us our journey to everybody for like how you got where you are today.
Okay. So I have a degree in marketing, and after I got married, I was kind of, I moved to Houston, so I was looking for something, and my mother-in-law actually then suggested medical billing and coding. She was a physician, so I didn't know what that was. I didn't even know if I was going to like it. So I did enroll myself in a vocational college in Houston to get medical billing and coding course. It used to be a single course at the time. It just used to be everything together. I know now it's like billing is separate and coding is completely separate. So when I got into it, I actually liked it. So I was like, okay, this is something that I can do long term. And my first job in the healthcare field, medical field, was working for my father-in-law, who was practicing as a cardiologist in the Houston area. So, but I started at the front desk. So it was not like a manager job or anything like that. So I started at the front desk, and he used to have paper charts at the time. So pulling paper charts and doing all the front desk things that you do with, scheduling patients, collecting copays, verifying insurance, all of those things. So just kind of learned from the ground up, right? I learned from the trenches, and identified a lot of the gaps as well in the independent practice, what kind of challenges the physicians face or the staff faces, and how to deal with insurance. Then, then I was moved back into the billing, so I did a lot of the billing and everything. And then when we moved to Dallas, I started working at the front desk again in an internal medicine practice, and then got a job, at a cardiology office here, very close to my home, only 10 minutes away. And he hired me as a biller, but then office manager left, a month later. So I was promoted to office manager. And so I was wearing a lot of hats, and I was doing a lot of other things besides billing. I was doing the billing, but there was a lot of management duties that were involved as well. So I do think that I learned pretty much every aspect of working in a medical practice. I don't have any experience working in the hospital systems or big groups or organizations, but this is where, when I started CodeRite, I think I carved my niche, working with smaller practices, a single physician or, less than 5 physicians with, minimal staff. So, and because those are the ones I feel need the most help, because they're the ones who they don't have like compliance officers, on staff. They don't have coders on staff. A lot of medical practices don't even have coders on staff. So they need a lot of the guidance that we have to offer. So I feel that that's where my strength comes, where when I'm helping those physicians, bringing them up to speed with different regulations and different things that are coming up in the industry. So that's a little bit of the background for me.
Nice. Yeah. Your mother-in-law was trying to look for hooking in some help there, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, do this. This is good. Yeah, that's good. By the way.
Cheap help, I guess.
Madriba, I was telling you before, my mentee, she's in Texas too, and she told me a similar story that her mother-in-law, had said, hey, why don't you look into this? So she was saying that, that she kind of had that same pathway there, people kind of pushing her along. But I do find that it is really helpful for those of us that have worked in the practices, and especially independent practices. You get a much different feel for what's going on, and because independent physicians are a lot different than working for employed physicians. You know, there's a lot more attention paid, you know, into the billing and coding and things like that in the independent physicians practices, because they know, you know, they got to keep their doors open. They know it's important. Whereas with employed physicians, a lot of times it's like, oh yeah, it just gets billed. You know, they get paid no matter what. I mean, their bonus kind of stuff might be affected, and that's when they pay attention. But like on average, on that daily kind of basis, it wasn't a driving factor that like everybody knew was important. And I find that in independent practices, everybody knows that. I mean, you know, it's just like, you want a job, you want to keep doing this, you know, we have to pay attention to these things. And they just have unique issues, I think. And then working the front to the back kind of aspect too, you get so much better experience and understanding of everything that's going on. So I don't think you can, you know, put a price tag on stuff like that. I've told a lot of people, you know, I see a lot of times people that are A's, you know, coming in new, and you know, they're like, they just want to be a coder. That's it. They don't, you know, and I'm like, well, there's many other things. So get your foot in the door, and you can gain a lot different ways experientially by working the front desk, you know, and it's a good way to get your foot in the door of a practice and start. You know, if you have no experience, that's a great place to start out. Get that exposure, get that work. Now, I find the front desk is one of the toughest places to work too, because they like have to do everything. They're answering phones, they're scheduling appointments, they're taking money, they're checking in patients, they're checking out patients, you know, so it's not easy, but you do get a great experience from doing that.
Yes.
So,
And the thing is that with the independent practice, it's just there's just so much to learn. You know, there's just so much to learn. You're not just kind of working in your little silo here. You know, you're a coder and that's all you're going to do. And I also see that a lot with new coders. You know, they just want a coding job. You know, me, you know, owning a billing company, I know that because I do interview a lot of coders, and you do work with codes. I mean, there's no way you can do billing without working with ICD-10 and CPT codes and HCPCS code. You're working with the claims. I find it so much rewarding. You know, even though I have coding certifications, I'm very partial to billing because you get that whole revenue cycle and you get to see, you know, the claim from its inception to it getting paid, and that's a very fulfilling feeling for me personally and the staff that works for me. I feel I have converted a few coders into billers. I must say that.
you brought them over to your side, right?
I have, yes.
Yeah, that's you know, especially from the billing side of it, when you're working denials, like, you know, our subject for today, you know, when you get the denial reasons in and you're looking at why it was denied, you've got to understand, is that, you know, is there a modifier that's justifiable? You know, was that ICD-10 code not the right code to show medical necessity? So yes, definitely anybody that does billing has to understand that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that, you know, they'd be able to, you know, code operative reports and things, but I mean, you have to have that knowledge of what's going on. So definitely for any newer coders that might be watching us today, any A's out there, you know, billing is a great place to once again get your foot into the industry, you know, or front desk at physicians' practices or healthcare systems if they have those kinds of openings. Just, you know, get in, you know, to the field is what you need to do, and the rest from once you get in just kind of grows from what you do, what you're showing, what your initiative is, you know. So it's like getting that just foot in the door to kind of race off from there. So that's just a little piece of advice from me from those A's that might be out there looking for their first coding job. You know, chill out, take some time, and, you know, look for other opportunities, other ways that you can use your skill sets. Now with CodeRite, how long have you had CodeRite, and what got you to start? Because you were saying that you were doing the front desk and then the billing and then into management. So what sparked you to kind of like, I've got to do my own?
So there were a couple of reasons. So before I started CodeRite, I was working in ACO with HCC coding, risk analysis, or risk adjustment, I should say, and extracting ICD-10 codes and for RAF scores. So I was doing that. I enjoyed it somewhat, but I was like, it was the same thing. You're looking at charts every day and you're extracting codes and all of that. I didn't think I enjoyed that all that much. And then after I had my daughter, it was kind of a decision that I wanted to make, was that because I'd been working since I was 17 years old, since I was, a junior in high school. So I was like, once I have children, I'm just gonna, be a stay-at-home mom, and I'm just gonna enjoy that phase of my life. And of course, by the time my daughter was 9 months old, I was kind of bored out of my mind. I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is for me. I could still be a good mom and still contribute and be
Yes.
productive in a professional capacity. So at that time, I just was, because I had so much background that I had seen where the gaps were and where my services would be needed. I just thought that let's see if I can kind of do something on my own. And thankfully, my husband having a full-time job and bringing in benefits and health insurance, that also helped that I can take a little bit of a risk and do something. I started with one client, another cardiologist who was a friend of the cardiologist that I used to work for. And he was like, I kind of wanted to be a consultant. Let's just say that I didn't want to be a billing company. And I kind of took offense to, like, I don't want to do billing. I'm a coder. Like, I was kind of in that headspace as well. I'm a coder, and I had recently gotten my CPMA as well. So I was like, I'm a coder and auditor, and this is what I want to do. But then the doctor's like, well, I need billing. My biller is leaving, and I need somebody to do my billing. Will you do that? Because I'm offering you something. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll start with that. And then, of course, it just kind of snowballed, one after the other and all of that. And then we just became primarily a billing company. I still do a lot of special projects, with the auditing and compliance consulting and those kinds of things as well. But primarily, we're a billing company. We we do billing for many specialties. We have cardiology, neurology, behavior health, which is coming up big time now, especially
Yeah.
with the pandemic and all of that, and podiatry. So I have 7 employees right now, and just made a really nice community of, we're all CodeRite proud, I guess I should say. So
Oh,
that's
that's very
how it all
nice.
started. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And shoot, what was I going to say? I had thought, oh, that always happens to me. It'll come to me. Oh, Texas. You're a great place to be in and working with independent physicians. Texas is one of is the state that has the most independent physicians left in it. I don't know if, for some people that are watching, if y'all didn't know that. So independent docs, they like Texas because, you don't mess with Texas and they're very independent. So
Yeah.
now with doing the billing side of it, is that, I know because you have your coding degree or certifications and your auditing certifications. So is it that front to back, like whole circle thing that kind of pulls you over to the billing?
Yeah, it kind of becomes a challenge for me a little bit to just strictly look at the billing side of it and not be a coder at the same time and not be an auditor at the same time. It's a little challenging. I know that as a billing company, with the contracts that we have with our clients, it's strictly like, whatever you give us, we're going to bill. But it's just, I can't do that. Like, fundamentally, it's like the coder in me comes out and the auditor in me comes out. And if I see something that's kind of like out of the ordinary, I have to speak up and I have to let my providers know that, hey, I'm noticing something. I'm seeing a lot of level 4s and level 5s. If you are putting the time in there, if you're documenting it, and if it's justified, it's perfectly fine. But just letting you know that shift has happened. Or, recently we had one of our neurology practices, they hired a new neurologist, and he started putting level 5s on everything, on every patient, and even the ones who were seen by the owner doctor, and he was like doing level 2s and 3s, and this guy is like doing level 5s on everything. And so we're like, oh, okay, we need to have a chat, But traditionally, as a billing company, like, I know that you don't get involved in that, but I think we try to kind of help out wherever we can. I mean, yes, if they want me to do an official audit, then of course, there's a separate charge for it and separate protocol for that. And then I have to have my tools, and everything, and try to do my due diligence and auditing their charts and giving them a report and all that. But we do like to keep our eyes and ears open to make sure that, not seeing things that are out of the ordinary, so we try. That's, I think, what makes us a little bit different, and probably that's our secret sauce as well. And of course, denial management is a big one, which I know we're going to get into more. So the way we work denials, I've had employees who are working with me who worked in other billing companies before and who've come from other practices before, and they all tell me that they've never done denial management the way they do it with us. And so I know we have something special, and I feel very proud of it.
That's good. And I bet your clients are very happy to get that little extra, from that coding. So when you see stuff, I'd be very, like, if I was a physician practice, I'd be appreciative if the billing service was saying, hey, I picked up on this pattern, because the physicians aren't, they just don't have time. They're seeing their patients. So I'm sure your clients are very happy to have that extra that they get from you. So I'm sure they're very appreciative of that.
And also, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Another thing is that, I feel like the doctors, the younger doctors who are kind of establishing themselves as independent physicians, are very open to collaboration. Yes. I feel like they want to bring in experts because they're physicians, they take care of their patients, that's their job, right? But they want to bring in people who will advise them and guide them in different aspects of running a business, because it's essentially, medical practice is a business, so they need to have people in place to advise them in different aspects of it. And I feel like the younger doctors are more open to that. And with a lot of older doctors, we've had some conflicts. I've had, them kind of looking down at me and saying, hey, I'm the doctor. What do you know? Kind of a thing. So I've gone through that as well. But I think that we're kind of have found a happy medium now with, we've kind of weeded out those kinds of doctors. It's like, maybe we're not a good match, and saying no and then walking away and all of that. So the doctors, the providers that we have right now, I think we have a good kind of a partnership established. So I really like that, and I cherish that relationship a lot.
That's very good. Yeah, you got to find a good mix that works on both sides, because otherwise it's a job. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I never wanted. I never wanted a job to where that's what it looks like. That's what's in my head. It's like that 9 to 5, and I have to do this, and I have to do so many hours. I don't feel like with what I do, it's not a job. I enjoy it. I love doing the things that I do. Like you, I, can take or not take on a client for whatever reason. Or if I have a client that we're not kind of gelling, I can say, well, appreciate it, but so that it keeps you to where I'm always psyched and I'm always ready and I'm always, excited about, what I do. So I think that's a very, very good thing to be able to do. So I think that's a little secret sauce on our side of what we're doing to keep us the way we are. Because sometimes people will say, boy, you guys, don't you ever, get this, or don't you ever, I just every day. I'm like, well, when you really enjoy it, that's not what it seems like to you. So yes. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen that are watching us, on to our subject matter for today. So thanks, Rozmin, for giving us a little background and understanding into how you are where you are and your philosophies. But we wanted to kind of talk about denials management. It's a subject I think I've had someone on, I think Vanessa Moldovan had come on and we spoke about things like this before, but I think it never gets enough. You can't hear things about this enough, because if there's one thing that I find in practices today is the denials aren't going away. They're not getting less. They're increasing. They're finding new and different ways to, do things to where you're jumping through the hoops, like Cigna and their modifier 25 thing that's supposed to be starting, in May. That's going to be just an absolute nightmare for practices if that goes through, with all of the documentation, the faxing, and all this crazy stuff that they want people to do. That I'm hoping that the AMA and the societies are getting some good push on them to where, they decide it's not a great idea again, like they did last time they tried it. But, we'll see. But, denials management, if you don't have money coming into the practice, you can't do anything. So, I used to tell my physicians that all the time when they would kind of like just poo-poo. I said, look, you could do 20 surgeries a day. If you're a surgeon, you could be doing $100,000 worth of services every month. But if it's not going out right and you're not getting paid for it, you're still going to be broke. You're still going to have to shut your doors. I mean, it doesn't work unless it flows all the way through and you get paid for all these things that you're doing. You can't get new equipment. You can't get new services. You can't do any of that stuff. Jordan Johnson always says, no money, no mission. So you've got to get that in to keep the practice flowing. Correct. So no matter how many times you talk about it, there's always so many different aspects about denials that you could go through. So some of the things that I wanted to kind of just pull up and have different discussion things were, like, what are some of the pain points that you see in the revenue cycle that people that are, on today and that they're watching, that they can kind of look for in their practices, that they can, start to tweak and start to kind of look at and maybe see if they can find areas for improvement. What are like the main areas that you think in a practice that are the weak points that need to be assessed in order to try to get that denial percentage dragging down a little bit?
Sure. So everything that I'm going to share today is probably coming from the experience of working with smaller practices and not big organizations, because I know there's a lot of different things that are involved in that. So I feel it's more than denial management, it's denial prevention. I do believe in that. And contrary to popular belief that denials happen because of coding errors, I think majority of it happens at the registration. It's getting that incorrect demographic information, insurance information, not verifying insurance. A lot of denials happen for, not getting referrals or authorizations, or out of network, when the patient's insurance is out of network or the provider is out of network, let's say. So, and not verifying that initially before seeing that patient. So those kinds of denials, I feel, are a little bit more difficult to work, because if you haven't gotten, like when we work with our practices, that we tell them, pick up the phone and call the insurance and get everything in writing. And well, in writing meaning you write everything down, whatever you're talking to the insurance, and we have set templates of eligibility and verification checks that we give them, which they can tweak according to their practice. And always get a reference number, because if they don't have a reference, let's say that the rep tells them, oh, there's no prior authorization needed for this procedure, right? And there's a reference number attached to it, that can be appealed at the back end. We can fight that. We did our due diligence as a practice. We called you, and we called you guys, and we verified, and we asked if this is going to be covered or not. Of course, insurance has other ways of, kind of twisting that as well. But if you don't have any kind of evidence to back it up or to fight it, then that becomes a little bit of a challenge. So I feel like a lot of prevention for denials can actually happen at the front desk, at the practice level, before it even comes to coding and before it even comes to billing. So a lot of those are denials, like not verifying like primary and secondary insurance, which is primary, which is secondary. I post a lot about that on LinkedIn about, traditional Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans, right? I mean, a lot of the seniors, they don't even realize that they've switched their insurance,
Yes. Yes.
during the open enrollment session period. And they're vulnerable, right? And then it's just like they come to the office and they empty out their wallet and they put all the cards together. But the front desk needs to be trained enough to know the difference, that, even though they have the traditional Medicare card, if there is a Medicare replacement, that becomes their primary payer. So those kinds of things, I feel, really do put a wrench in the denial process. Okay, and then I can move on, but
Yeah, no, yeah, I think you're right. And I think traditionally in a lot of practices, unfortunately, the front desk, oh, I lost Rozmin, so I'm sure she'll come back on. Traditionally, the front desk is the least trained and the kind of felt to be the kind of lowest peg on the totem pole in the practice. And there you are.
there.
I said, I found that traditionally the front desk person they look at that like the lowest level where you're starting, where you're, and so they don't spend the time sometimes with those employees to make sure they understand all those things that are so important, that the practices money flow depends on that information you get at first. And yeah, patients, especially Medicare age patients, they're just going to say they have Medicare. They're not going to say I have Medicare Advantage or Medicare Replace. They have no idea. They just say I have Medicare. And so I think understanding that flow and training those people more comprehensively, could put an end or a stop to a lot of those back end problems that you get. And I like Haley has said, she says, your statement of denials prevention is the perfect wording. If we prevent things on the front end, you don't have as many denials to manage. So that really is, I do like that denial prevention more than the denials management thing. But yeah, one of the practices that I was managing years ago, I would hear from the billing people. It wasn't a large practice, but it was large enough that we had front desk and we did have our own biller, and our own coder, because we had a couple of general surgeons and we had some infectious disease doctors. So, we had a good flow going in there. And the biller would always complain when she'd get denials about, what are they doing up there? If they would just, blah, blah, blah. And then the front desk person was just like, oh, they don't understand. And they, so I made them switch places, and I brought the biller up to the front desk. And I was like, okay, the phone started ringing, the things started, and she thought she was going to lose her mind. And I was like, well, now you get it, and then for the front desk person, when she would see some of those denials, I was like, well, did you ask that patient if their insurance had changed when they came in? I don't think so. I'm like, well, that's why we got this denial, that they don't have coverage anymore. So it's interesting when you can do that and show them, both sides of it, that they got along much better after that, had a much better understanding of each other. But that front desk area is tough. It's very tough to try to get all that stuff done and keep the front desk moving. So do you have any kind of advice that you would give to practices that are kind of trying to control that, to make sure that they're getting a better handle on that front desk stuff?
Yeah, I apologize. I think the neighbors are mowing their yard. I'm really sorry about the timing. But yes, to answer your question, a lot of times I do feel that those duties can be separated in a way where front desk people, I feel, should not be answering the phones. That's my opinion, and I've trained some of the practices with that. The phone, answering the phone component can be kind of taken in the back, so the front desk can be, doing other things like, patient facing, right, getting checking in the patient, looking in their chart, making sure everything's correct and all of that. So that's one of the tips that I give to front desk, to take the answering of the phone kind of away from them, so they're not distracted, because of course, the phones ring off the hook
Yeah.
in medical practices. So that's that. And of course, a lot of it comes with the verification process. So training that person is very important, or even outsourcing that, verification. And if the physician office, it's a very small office, they don't want to bring on more staff. I think it's good to have a virtual assistant, and it's good to have that outsourced. I think that can also work to their benefit, to get to have that job completed, but not have to have that incur another expense of hiring a full-time employee. So those are a couple of tips that I would give.
Do you recommend for them to do as much online as possible, or do you find you get better information when it's like pick up the phone and call them? Because I've heard kind of things both ways, where some people say, well, I go into the portal for the payor, I can type this stuff in, they send me the verification. And I have other people, depending on the payor, that they say it's just a nightmare trying to do it online, and it doesn't work half the time, or it's down, or it's this, or it's that. Do you find that one way over the other, is better, or does it depend on the payor or the office?
So picking up the phone and talking to a live person is always the best thing, but that's the most time consuming as well. So getting into a portal is good, but then I think training is very important for somebody who's actually going into the portal and looking at things, right? Because there's some things hidden in there. There's tabs in there that they may not be looking at. They may not be going all the way down and scrolling all the way down to the screen to get some pertinent information that is available. And that happens. I've seen that on Availity as well. They'll have all this information at the top, and then way at the bottom they'll have additional payer. So it's like, if you haven't scrolled all the way down, you don't know that there's an additional payer, right? So yes. So yeah, to answer your question, yes and no. Portals are great. They're time saving, and they work great, but the person, whoever is looking at the portal, should know what they're really looking for, and extract that information from the portal. But of course, if you have enough capacity to have somebody sitting on the phone and calling the insurance and getting those answers from a live rep, and getting that reference number, like I said earlier, is super important. So I'm all for picking up the phone and calling, but I know that a lot of practices are short staffed. They don't have enough resources to do it, so that may be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, the reference number thing. So somebody is saying, let's see, we have Sonia that says the front desk is definitely the least trained. It's important for the front desk to ask the right questions to the payor and to the patient. So definitely agreed there. I think the front desk staff needs a little bit more attention paid to them sometimes in offices, to make sure they're getting that stuff. And then she also had a good comment about automated templates, for patients to complete, to help things kind of go. My physician, I just went, I just went to my physician last week, and now when you go in, they give you a tablet, and you check that, yes, this is still correct. Yes, this is, instead of them saying, has anything changed? I always hate that question when they say that, just that, because depending on the patient, like me, I know what they're asking, but somebody else who might not even pay attention, or they don't remember from 6 months ago that their insurance has changed, or they got a new card, or they got, they're just going to say no and go sit down. So that's something that the practice that I go to has started. When you check in, they hand you a tablet over, and you go check through your medications, your insurances, your addresses, all that. You have to actually click that, yes, it's still the same. Yes, it's still the. Now, somebody could just go through that and click yes, yes, yes without looking at it, but the chances are a lot better than just saying, has anything changed, to get them to do that. So there's those kinds of things where you put the onus a little bit on the patient, to do some of that work too. And what Lupe is saying though, with the, talking to them live, that the hold times sometimes are outrageous. And that's where that problem is. I can recall years ago when I was like 19 and I was working a front desk, we'd switch off, you'd work like certain days or half the day up front, and then the other half you would be in back, helping with the processing of the claims and all that stuff. But I would call certain, when we would call Medicaid for the state at the time, it was just, you would just put it on speakerphone and just keep doing what you were doing, because it would be like an hour and a half later when somebody would finally pick up the phone. So yeah, that's the downside to doing the phone conversation issue, is that, yeah, sometimes it feels like it's next to impossible. And then when you get somebody might be absolutely trained and can't answer your questions, or doesn't know how, or I've been to where you can hear the clicking on the computer keys as you're asking them questions, because they're typing your question into the computer, and the computer gives them an answer of where, in what manual, in what chapter the person needs to go look. So they won't answer you, but they'll tell you where to go look for it, because they don't want to say anything that somebody could come back and say, well, we were told this by, so they're like, oh, you interpret it the way you want to interpret it. I'm going to point you in the direction, but I'm not going to answer you. So you get that little kind of runaround-ish thing sometimes from the payors when you're speaking to them live.
Yeah, I've also had a rep at Medicare tell me, I can't tell you how to code, and I was like, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking for a denial reason. So yeah, they get a little testy as well.
Yes, they can. So what are you seeing in practices as kind of like the top denial things these days? I know like modifier 25, people are saying, is one that, we see a lot with a lot of things, but are you seeing a lot of it being more clerical type things of not having the right number, being out of network, not doing that front end work? Is that where you're seeing a lot of the back end stuff still?
Yeah, so it kind of varies from practice to practice. So if the front desk in a particular practice is doing their due diligence and all of that stuff is okay. A lot of times where we struggle with is in the documentation where it's unspecified codes, when the physicians are using unspecified codes. And I've also noticed that some payers will not pay for an unspecified code. I've dealt with something with Humana the other day as well. It's like, if there's a more specific code, we're not going to pay for an unspecified code. They denied that for medical necessity. And I'm like, what medical necessity are we talking about and everything? So that was very fresh in my mind. And I was like, I wanted to bring that up, that make sure that you are coding the diagnosis to the highest level of specificity. So that's one thing. Of course, modifier errors are also big. And of course, medical necessity based on LCD. That's another big one. I actually was following up on a claim today that was denied by CGS, which is we work with a provider in Kentucky. So CGS, it's the MAC over there, and it was for medical necessity. And when you think about medical necessity, you think about the diagnosis code, right? You're like, well, the diagnosis code is there in LCD. So what's going on? And I had to go through like 3 or 4 reps before one finally came up and said, well, this code is only covered once in a patient's lifetime. And I was like, wow, like even for them denying the claim, they didn't have that answer for me. And I'm like looking at the LCD and I'm like, where does it say that? Can you point it out to me?
Yeah.
They showed me and everything. Of course, the physician, when I told him that, didn't like it, because he's like, this is necessary. And then we talked about ABN and all of that as well. So, yeah, those kinds of denials do happen, where it's like, okay, this is only paid once in their lifetime, or this is only paid, once every year. It's the frequency of coding. Those are some denials that we have seen recently as well. And bundling, unbundling, those are also big ones. So these are the ones that are not clerical, the actual coding errors that we deal with on a pretty regular basis across all specialties, actually.
Yeah, those sound like the ones that I hear about the most from my clients that are asking me about things. You know, when the practices are calling me for assistance, a lot of it is about modifier issues, especially, of course, modifier 25 forever and ever. We're always going to have issues with that. But when I start talking with the practices about, you know, you have to understand and look for the LCD. I found the ABNs are still highly misunderstood.
Yeah.
And we've had ABNs now for like ever, but I'm still finding that practices don't understand when they're supposed to get them done or the criteria around it. And I'm like, you have to understand when it's a sometimes thing. That's when you need the ABN. And for those of y'all that are on, if you're newer, an ABN is an advanced beneficiary notice. It's a form that CMS Medicare has that if you have a Medicare patient that you're doing a service to that is sometimes paid by Medicare, sometimes not, then you need to tell the patient that and have them sign an ABN that says they understand that, and that if Medicare denies it, they personally will pay for it then. Because they were finding, or CMS was stating, that they thought some of the Medicare patients were getting taken advantage of by physicians doing all these unnecessary things to them and then sticking them with the bill. So they came up with this whole advance notice thing. So when a patient is presented with an ABN, you know, you have to fill it out to why, you know, you think it may be denied, and, you know, and the patient has to sign it. And then there's specific modifiers that go on to the service so that if it is denied, Medicare will know if you had the ABN signed and if you had it signed correctly. I get practices, sometimes it will still tell me that, you know, well, we just have everybody. I'm like, no, please don't tell me that. They just get them signed. I'm like, don't, no. I'm like, you can't do that. I like, you have to understand those kind of things like pap smears and, you know, any kind of thing that is paid on a conditional basis. They'll have an LCD or an NCD about it. You know, when you're seeing things like that, anything to do with frequency, diagnosis, you know, those are things you want to get the ABN signed for. Otherwise, you know, you're just kind of hassling the patient if you're getting it signed every single time. That's just not right. You can't do that. But the important thing is to follow it up with the right modifier. You know, I find that, you know, they're like, well, we had it signed, but we didn't. And I said, well, you didn't. There's no modifier there that tell Medicare that you did get it signed. So, you know, if you don't get the ABN signed before they have the service, that's the other thing. I'll get it where they'll say, well, you know, the doctor did this, and on the way, you know, when they didn't know they were going to do it. So when the patient checked out, I had him sign it then. I'm like, no, you can't do that either. So, you know, you have to have it signed before you do the service because the patient needs the right to refuse. You know, they need to be able to say, then, no, I don't want that. You know, so otherwise you're kind of forcing them to take on a procedure that they might be financially responsible for that they didn't understand at the time. That's the whole kind of thing with that. So I see a lot of it with the modifiers with the ABN. Do you find that that there still is a little misunderstanding in that area?
Well, there is a lot of misunderstanding with ABN. Some of them, like you mentioned, some physician offices want patients to sign it every time, and some just don't even know that ABNs exist. You know, it's something that is something they can use, and yeah, like it needs to be spelled out. The form has everything on it. You also need to write down the estimated cost at the time that the patient would have to pay once the claim is denied. So ABN training, I think that's a good training that I can probably offer too. ABN training.
There you go.
Another revenue stream there, ABN training. So yes. So yeah, I do see that there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to ABNs. Yes.
Yeah, Teresa, the different modifiers. Yeah, that's where I get people, is it GX? Is it GY? Which one? It's a G something I know, but I don't know which one it is. And because there's also, if you want the denial because you need it to be able to submit to their secondary, then people get like, I find people get totally confused with, I know it's a G something. I don't know which one I'm supposed to do on this. And, but it's important to get it right, because if you don't, Medicare, in their EOB, in the EOMB that the patient gets, it says you don't have to pay this. You didn't know, so you're not responsible. And now then for your office to try to go back to that patient and say that they owe you the money when they've got a thing for Medicare saying they don't, you're going to have an issue. So you got to make sure that you're following all this stuff for the ABNs and doing it correctly. So before the service, when it's a sometimes service, use the correct modifiers and you'll have a smooth sailing, right? So we have also, we got a comment from that says, I believe each practice deals with this kind of eligibility and benefit denials. I'm also following the same way, advising and training front desk people to identify how they can verify eligibility. Do you find that eligibility, I've seen that comment a couple times. So eligibility is another thing that we're seeing a lot of.
Yes, eligibility verification is extremely important. Like I gave you the traditional Medicare and the replacement example, right? That's the thing. If you're verifying eligibility, Medicare is going to show that it's active, but that they may not necessarily be the payer. And then, of course, you have your primary and secondary also, and a lot of times we also deal with some practices that see minors, right? So it's the birthday rule for the parents if both parents are insured, and there's a lot of confusion about that. Which should be primary, which should be secondary. So of course, whichever parent's birthday falls first in the year, not necessarily who's older. So there's just there's some misunderstanding and confusion for that. So yes, eligibility checks, and of course, a lot of portals are very sophisticated nowadays, and they're integrated with a lot of the PM systems and EMRs and stuff. So if they can give you a good amount of information, then yeah, utilize those portals and save time. Absolutely.
Yes, I see. D'Amica has a really good piece of advice here. So I wanted to put this up too, about training and highly recommending the Medicare MAC portals to verify their traditional Medicare and MAC coverage. As you stated, Rozmin, knowing the tabs and the right information is vital, but it cuts down on your Medicare coordination of benefits denials tremendously. So yeah, if you know that there's the payors, it's a big payor that you use, and they have a good portal, definitely, use that to your advantage and take full advantage of it. And make sure you're going to that, because then that will be a bigger time saver than trying to get people on the phone all the time. Also, Guadalupe made a comment about internal errors from the payor, and that's something I think you also have to keep in mind. She said Aetna had to call due to a 25 modifier not being recognized by their software. I have a couple of friends who work for payors, and we've been having discussions, and they used to have me come out, and I would give annual conferences for all their providers, any of the providers for that insurance that wanted to come. They would put this on for them every year, because they said, for us, getting denials is not good, because we have to then put people on it when the things come back. We have a lot of paper that we have to go through. So she's like, we would much prefer that the electronic adjudicator just pay it right, just get it right, because then we don't have to do and mess with that stuff if it pays everything correctly. It's when the denials pop out, that we then have to start looking for things. And if it's a bad denial, then, we're wasting our people's time and money working them on our end. So they don't like denials either, is what, she was saying. That was her point. And so she said, we had an example once, we update our software just like everybody else updates their software, and sometimes something doesn't go right. Just like I'm sure everybody that's watching that has an EHR, sometimes they do an update and now something else doesn't work that you didn't even know was was broken. So she said she had an example. They did an update and something on it was a specific CPT ICD-10 combo. It was kicking it out, just automatically, wrongly. And she says, and this went on, they had done the update, and it was 4 weeks later, almost a month. Finally, she said somebody called and said, what is going on with this? Why are we getting this weird denial? And she said, that's when they found out. She said, so we appreciate if you see something weird, call us. She said, because we had to then go back and re-adjudicate all those claims that were wrongly denied, and she said that was a lot of extra work for us, but we had no idea what was going on. So sometimes the payor really doesn't know that those things are happening. So if you do see something weird, like modifier 25 doesn't exist, make sure that, you're going back and contacting those payers for those things, because sometimes they don't know that the glitch is there.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
One of the biggest side effects of that is that a lot of practices don't have proper resources to actually make that phone call or even ask that, hey, why is this getting denied or whatever. A lot of times those denials just never get worked on, and they just kind of, leave money on the table. And that's the sad part of it. That's why, when I say that, having those enough resources, either within the practice or, outsourcing it to a billing company that's proficient in working denials, I think you save a lot of headache. And contrary to the belief that, billing companies are expensive, I get that a lot. But you have to see how much money is just kind of left on the table when no one's really working those denials. And like you said, it could be an honest mistake from the payer's end where they didn't update their software and nothing got updated. So all these denials are coming through, and you're just kind of, sitting on these denials. And after a certain time, you just can't even work on those. So yeah, there's all these components that actually have to work together for, the money to come in. So.
Yeah. I think that's a good point with using, especially smaller independent practices, utilizing places like, billing services like you have. They're not really paying up front. Do you work on a percentage basis? Is that usually how the services still are running these days?
Yes, so, percentage basis, and at the back end, so they pay us when they collect. Yeah.
Okay. So when you look at it that way, they're not fronting the money, and they're probably collecting more because you're doing it. So actually the service probably pays for itself, or close to it, I imagine. So there's a lot of benefit to using billing services for smaller practices, because they don't want to bring on the extra people. They don't have the time, or the people that they have can't get to it or don't understand it, and they just can't get another employee in there. Some places they can't get employees. I have one office, they tell me this, we've been trying to hire somebody in here for 6 months. We can't get anybody that knows what they're doing, because we're in this area where there just aren't those kind of people around here. So, you may also have issues where you just can't get the right staff. So that kind of using a billing service can solve a lot of those issues for an independent practice or small group. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind, I think. Need to check ICDs for preventative. Yeah. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour almost. Can you believe that? So this was a very good discussion. I like the interaction. People have been very good today with putting some things up. And there's Jeanette Hayes has put a comment in here for you personally, Rozmin, that you can answer, or I'll send you, so you can address it with her offline maybe. But yeah, a lot of good comments, and I appreciate the interaction today, y'all. And Rozmin, thank you so much for being my guest today. I think this was a really good discussion. And if there's something like this that you would like to come back and discuss with everybody, I'd love to have you back as a guest. Oh, we didn't get to Sonal's question. Do you have a minute to do that real quick?
Sure,
Your top
yeah, I
3
actually have it written
improvement
down. I can even
recommendations?
email her separately.
So Sonal, my good friend and collaborator who's been doing a lot of these with me, she had to go visit her parents. So she's on a plane, but she put this question out for top 3 improvement recommendations for denials management in 2023. So what would you say for that, Rozmin?
So the number one is that you need to find out what the PARA guidelines are about working those denials and reconsiderations and appeals. So how do they want you to communicate with them? Is it, via fax, portal, email, not email, mail, or do they want you to use a specific form for reconsideration? Is it a free form letter? So those kinds of things are very important to first know what each pair needs or wants for you to, what process to follow. Another one is to build a resource library. We do that on our end also. We have templates of appeal letters. So it's like you're just kind of tweaking them with the information here and there, but then you're not reinventing the wheel per se, right? So there's a resource library. So you have to keep that, like, those forms that you have to keep payer specific stuff. So that's another one. And then set a schedule for denial management. It's which day of the week are you going to be working those denials? So that day you're focused, you're calling insurance, you're resubmitting claims, you're writing those appeals, or you're faxing, uploading, whatever you need to do. So set that day in a week. For me, it's actually Thursday. So that's my denial management day. So just put your phone on D&D and work those denials. So those will be my top 3.
Oh, those are great. So for those of y'all that hung on there, you got some wonderful, great tips here at the end from Rozmin. I think those are fabulous ones. So thanks everybody for being on with us today. So we appreciate y'all, and we'll look forward to, I think in a couple weeks, it is going to be Sonal back on with me for our audit, our second of our audit series on talking about actually performing the audit. So that'll be a good one. And as I said, Rozmin, I'd love to have you back again sometime to continue this discussion. And people had a lot of questions, a lot of interaction. So I'm sure it would be very gladly received by everybody. So y'all all have a good weekend. And any parting words from you, Sonal? Or Rozmin? I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Sonal now.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really had fun. I had a lot of fun. This was great. And I see all the comments on the side. It's a great discussion and great interaction. So this was fun, and I'd be happy to be back for sure.
Wonderful. All right, y'all. Thanks and have a good weekend. See you soon.